This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 77 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we are joined by the cast of FS1's Breakfast Ball, Craig Carton, Mark Schlereth, and Danny Parkins. First of all, thank you all for coming on the podcast today. This is cool to have you all here, but I'm going to start with Craig because you're in year 3 of hosting this morning show for FS1 now. 3 years, 3 different sets of co-hosts. How does this version compare to the Carton Show?
Well, it's been an evolution. What started as, just get me on the air as quickly as possible, became something more thoughtful as the 2.5, years have gone by. And we were just always trying to find the right people, get the right people at the right time based on availability, obviously, and then figure out, what other people out there in the world of broadcasting, would work well with me, that I enjoyed working with, that has, similar sensibilities. And I would say, not just because this is the current show, but this is by far the best version of what may have started as the Carton Show, but has evolved into Breakfast Ball. Since I walked through the front doors of Fox, Mark and I had talked about working together literally since the first year of the Carton Show, when he came on as a guest for a week at a time. And the timing was just never perfect on my side, Fox's side, or Mark's side. And this time it was. And Danny, who is familiar to Fox, through his relationship with Nick Wright and then with Colin, was the missing piece that would blend, I think, successfully what Mark brings to the table as a former player, what I brought to the table as, a broadcaster. And I think the guys will tell you the same thing. Most new shows have growing pains, whether it's figuring each other out or ego, or I want the microphone more than you want get the microphone. We're going to talk over each other. And I think a lot of it, because we all have these radio backgrounds, we've avoided a lot of that. And I think the show is really, really good. Only 3 months in. And I've said this, a million times. I would blindly put our show up any day, throw a dart at any segment against any show on any network, and tell you that we'd win the battle. Entertainment-wise, factual-wise, stat-wise, and relationship-wise. And I think, not speaking for the guys too much, but we're all really proud of that because it's not easy to do that.
What does Breakfast Ball strive to be? Like, Undisputed was strictly a debate show. The facility, like, you're going to get more X's and O's. Is there a show that you're trying to emulate? What should viewers expect when they tune in?
No, I don't think we're emulating any show. I think we're trying to, cut the path that shows are going to want to follow what we do. And I think what we do really, really well, and I know the ethos of the show for the three of us and for Fox, is that you laugh a little, you learn a little every morning, every segment. We're not trying to set the world on fire, trying to prove that we know more sports than the next guy. None of us have any interest in yelling at each other, I'm right, you're wrong, or back and forth. I think you'll see a show that's very self-deprecating in what we bring to the table, that's entertaining every day. It's organically funny every day. And oh, by the way, we also happen to know our shit. And I think that's really unique when you compare it to any other show, not just on Fox, but on any network, that you have 3 guys who are all willing to give a little bit of themselves based on where we were prior to this for the betterment of the team. And I tell you, every day of the week, I believe we deliver on that promise of being entertaining and yet compelling at the same time.
What about you, Danny? What were you kind of pitched on when you came to this show?
Do you want to do a TV show and move to New York? You know what I mean? They weren't sharing a lot of details at the beginning, and I was like, yeah, I'm in. But I was obviously aware of Craig for a long time in radio before he got to TV, and then Stink for forever. just in every platform for football. And so like when they told me what the pairing was, I was really excited about it. And I do put a lot of stock, I'd been a career radio guy, and I put a lot of stock in our radio backgrounds in terms of why we were able to hit the ground running so quickly. In radio, we do 4-hour shows, and it's impossible for it to be scripted. And you've got to listen to your co-host, and you've got to listen to a caller, and you've got to listen to a guest and producers and all of that. So like I always would talk about it as like active listening or improv or yes and. And so like the three of us having a radio background, like 2 hours is a long television show, but it's a really short radio show. And so our show flies by. And so when they told me that this was the pairing, I was like, oh, that's going to work, because I knew neither of those guys took themselves too seriously. And with the radio background, I was pretty confident that we'd be able to, deliver on the entertainment and the substance of the content and never feel like, oh God, we got to go 8 minutes on this. How are we going to do that? Like 8 minutes is nothing for the three of us. So when I was told what the arranged marriage was, I was pretty confident in it from day one.
Yeah, Mark, I know you made cameo appearances on the Carton Show the first couple of years. So why were you interested in becoming a full-time member? And also, did you know Craig at all before that? Did you know of him at all when he was a radio host in Denver? I don't remember what the years were when he was there and you were with the Broncos.
Yeah, no, I've known of Craig, but I did not know Craig. And I know he worked in Denver, but I did not know him. And so the very first time I sat on the set with Craig, and it was the Carton Show, we just kind of hit it off and goofed around and had a good time doing it. And I will say this, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Craig Carton. He has championed my cause for 2.5 years when they were talking to me about coming on and being part of Craig's show earlier, at the very first iteration of the show. He has championed my cause to the bosses and everything else when my schedule wouldn't allow me to be here. And then when things finally opened up, I know he made multiple calls on my behalf to be a part of this thing, even when they were going, or they thought, or it looked like they were going in a different direction. So that part's been there. There's just been a strong natural connection, and there's been a strong natural chemistry between the three of us since the day we started. And there is plenty of ball busting that goes on. There's plenty of camaraderie. It is entertainment, but it's informative entertainment. And so it's just been a really good mixture from day one. And it's been interesting because like Craig has hosted radio shows for decades. So has Danny for a decade. I've never hosted anything. And so, they put me in this role that I have zero clue on what I'm doing. And these guys have been really gracious to help shows. Yes, it does, to help me along the way, because I've got no, it's interesting. I just have no experience doing it, but I tell you what, with working with these two blowhards, it's been really easy because they just, all I got to do is, I don't even have to formulate a question. They just take it and roll. So it's been good. We've had a good time.
Yeah, I give Mark a note after every show. No one knows this, and the note is the same every day. And he'll tell you, it says, "You suck today, be better tomorrow."
Yeah.
So
we're waiting. We're waiting for that day. We're waiting for that day.
Well, don't hold your breath, Danny.
I won't.
It ain't coming anytime soon. I promise you that.
What was your comfort level, Mark, when you found out that you were going to kind of take the lead and be the one introducing topics?
I was scared to death because it's something I've never done. Two, to be completely transparent, I'm a dyslexic kid from Alaska that didn't learn to read till I was in the 7th grade. So initially when they said I was getting on a plane to come do our first shows, and we were filling in a Colin Cowherd slot, and that's when they said, in passing by, I was talking to Zach, one of our coordinating producers. He goes, "Okay, when you bring the show in from break," and I was like, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "Yeah, when you bring the show in from break or you're throwing to break." I go, "Excuse me, what? What are we talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, you're hosting the show." And I was like, I'm what? And they go, "They haven't told you?" I go, "No, nobody told me this. They hired me as an analyst." And so I had no idea. I'm getting on a plane, And my initial thought, like there was anxiety. My initial thought was, I can't do this. It's still every day. That's a hard thing for me, especially when they give you a script and they're like, hey, get us through this promo like that. That is not what I've ever done. I've never.
Well, hang on. Let's be honest. The initial reaction, because he already signed the contract, was, you got to pay me more.
Yeah, that was another part. But like, you guys duped me. You got me. But yeah, it's been a really interesting transition, and it's Danny talked about active listening, and I've always tried to really be good at that as in my analyst role, listening to the other analysts and playing off whatever they had to say. Well, it's been harder for me because Danny's talking, and then the producer's in my ear going, okay, get us to this and ask Craig this and this, and so that becomes a little bit more challenging for me, having never been in that position. And I think it gets easier all the time. But Danny and Craig will both tell you, I don't pay any attention to like who's playing where and like the history of I'm a football analyst. I love the X's and O's. I love to dig into it. Like, I give a shit where you're playing. I just don't care any of that stuff. So that's been something that I've had to actually kind of pay attention to. I usually let Danny do that for me, but I've kind of tried to pay attention to it.
It cracks me up. Like, it'll be on a Friday, and I'll make a pick in a game, and I'll be like, and this team is coming off a bye and at home, and Stink will say to me, like, either on air often or off air, he'll be like, buddy, I didn't know that they came off a bye. I'm like, it's Friday. Like, how do you don't know the matchup? It's one thing to not know the next week's matchup on Monday or Tuesday. You don't know who's playing where on Friday. But in all seriousness, like, Stink being vulnerable about that and reading scripts on national television when he wasn't able to read until the 7th grade is like a tremendously inspirational thing. Like, that's obviously dyslexia is real, and there's a ton of people that deal with it, and there's a ton of people that are not able to confront it and overcome it in any way, not through any fault of their own. So for him to be able to do it and read scripts on national television, it's really impressive. And then sometimes when I look over the shoulder and see that word in the script, I'm like, ooh, the big fella's going to have some trouble with that one.
Craig, what was your thought of having Mark kind of host the show, like, especially being that you did a lot more of that for the first couple of years, so now kind of having that almost taken away from you and given to Mark, who hasn't really done it before?
I'm still concerned that nobody told me yet. I'm like, look, it was obviously it was a big change. It was a change for me also, just based on what I've done in my career, for 30 plus years in radio, as usually being the guy driving it. But the rationale of it also made sense to me, that they're trying to take the best of what I do and allow my brain to be free to do that. And like I said at the start of this, a show like this, at the level this is, has no shot of being successful if I got a big ego, or if the guys have a big ego and think the show's more about one of us versus all three of us. Like, we're blessed to have this opportunity. There's only really 2 networks that exist in the world, and by proxy, maybe 6 total shows that are able to do this on a daily basis between those 2 networks. So whatever is good for the team is good for me, and whatever gives us, the fastest track record to success, I'm all about it. Like, I've never been a big ego guy. I believe I'm good at what I do. But if Danny's going to be the rock star one day, great. And if Mark's going to be the rock star one segment, great. And if I'm in the background for one of those segments, great. Because I truly believe the only way this is successful, both short-term and long-term, and we've all, taken a pretty good gamble here with our lives and our careers, that this is not, a 1-year run, that, we're doing interviews like this, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, knock on wood, 10 years from now. The only way for that to happen is to take turns. And it's not about any one of us. It's got to be about the collective.
How was having to go on air that that first week without a dress rehearsal? And Danny, I'll ask you, especially because you've done less television than Craig and Mark both have. So how was that first week just going in there without having worked with them at all?
Yeah, it was weird. It was definitely unusual. We did a couple. We all went out to dinner on a Wednesday at a steakhouse in New York. Did a few things on a Thursday and Friday, and then we're on the air on Monday. So it was obviously weird. I thought I was going to be much more nervous than I was, and I think the only thing I can attribute that to is because Craig just kind of alluded to it. Like, we all kind of took gambles and different ways on this. But I have a soon to be 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and had recently purchased my first ever house in my dream city near my family, doing I moved for this. And so I was living away from my wife, away from my kids, trying to sell a house, flying back to Chicago every Friday. So my personal life was a lot more stressful than launching a national TV show, which should be stressful in its own right. But I was able to kind of just be like, well, the show has to work because I'm doing all of these things in my personal life to make it work. So I was just very focused on I'm here for a reason. We've got to make this good, and we've got to make this fun. And so the show was fun because it was a relief of I don't have to think about mortgage rates and contractors and, preschools and childcare and my wife's job. You know what I mean? So it was not to get too real or personal with you, but the show, it was okay, I signed a contract. Clearly people believe that I can do this. I'm here, I'm doing it. And this is honestly, in some weird way, simpler right now than my personal life because of all of those moving pieces. So that first day, I wasn't really thinking about the fact that we hadn't done a lot of dress rehearsals. I was just thinking, when am I going to sell my house?
But Brandon, think about this. I'll speak up for Danny for a second. Before we ever started this show, Danny, as a Chicago sports talk radio guy, was given an opportunity to fill in for Colin Cowherd, right? And do a solo show in Colin's spot, a 3-hour TV show without many people knowing who he was outside of Chicago and Kansas City. Doing this show is easy compared to doing that, when that show essentially is your demo tape. That's the show where you prove to Fox executives, I can do this and I can carry a show. And I guarantee you, if Danny had failed at that, he's not doing this. So this is easy compared to that.
Well, thank you. There is definitely some truth to that. I'd done 3 or 4 weekends, or not weekends, but flown out 3 or 4 different times to do appearances on First Things First. And I was like, man, those were easy. I'm sitting next to my best friend. I'm the 4th voice on an established show. They tell you what you're going to talk about, and you do it 8 or 10 minutes at a time. And every time I would leave, they'd be like, do you want to come back in 2 weeks? Do you want to come back in 4 weeks? So I knew it was building to something. And then when they asked me to fill in for Colin, I was like, oh, holy shit, something might be happening here. And then when the Colin thing ended, there was no come back for this or go to New York for this. It was just kind of yeah, we'll be in touch. And so I had no idea what was coming. And there's definitely some truth to 3 hours solo TV when you've never done that before. And now Mark Schlereth has to read the intros. I'm like, okay, yeah. yeah. What do I got to do? I just got to give takes. So yeah, the Colin thing was huge for me to convince myself that I could do it. That is 100% true.
Well, is it a lot harder to fill in for Cowherd? Because obviously when you're more so by yourself, you're in total control. You know how you want to plan out a show, you know what you want to do. Whereas when you have now 2 new co-hosts, developing chemistry could be half the battle.
No doubt, but it's also not all on you. If our chemistry doesn't work, it's not 100% on me or Craig or Stink or whatever. It's a shared thing. It's a collaboration. I have done a lot of solo radio. So if I was filling in for Colin on radio, I'd have some nerves, but I would know going into it 100% that I could do it. But 3 hours, you're giving takes for 12 minutes at a time, staring down the barrel of a television camera in the biggest studio I've ever been in my life, having never met anyone, having not been to LA other than 2 days when I was 17 years old looking at USC. Like, it was out, I'm literally that I shared this anecdote before, but they share a studio, with Skip Bayless's show Undisputed at the time, and there's no break. So, like, in the corner of your eye, Skip Bayless and Rachel Nichols and Paul Pierce or Keyshawn Johnson, whoever it was, were talking about the Cowboys. And then the camera just like pans across the room and he goes, da-na-na, like the intro to the herd. The red light goes on and they're like, give your take on the Cowboys or give your take on Team USA basketball. And Skip Bayless is just walking off like 8 feet to your left. It's weird. It's intimidating. It's disorienting. So that is and was objectively much harder than this job. But I hope to fill in for Colin again someday. Like, it was a rush, and it was a huge thrill to be asked. That's not even like I'm on the Fox team or a cliche or whatever. When they asked me to do that, I was like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, I'm in. It was other than getting offered a TV show, it was the biggest professional thrill of my career, no question.
So does doing the herd, does that feel more like doing a TV show than it is doing a radio show that is simulcast on TV?
Well, I wasn't actually simulcast on the radio those 2 days because I was still working.
Oh, okay. So that was
for a competing radio company.
So they had somebody else filling in on the radio.
And someone else filling in the radio those 2 days. But you have to do it like a radio show. Like, you talk to the graphics and the plays or whatever, but it's your radio skills are, you have to. You're monologuing for 8, 10, 12 minutes without bouncing anything off. So you have to treat that like a radio show, but you're just aware of video, graphics, stats, cameras, whatever the case may be. So even though that is objectively a television show, and it was only a television show when I was hosting it, I treated it like a radio show because I didn't know how to do a 3-hour solo TV show.
Yeah. I know the facility is more the replacement for Undisputed, but you mentioned like it just being a little bit intimidating when seeing Skip Bayless off to the side while you're doing the herd. Is there any extra pressure for any of you knowing that FS1 made you guys part of the succession plan for Skip Bayless?
No, I think we love it. Obviously, larger audience, moving the show from where it was back to 8 to 10, more potential eyeballs on it. And whatever time slot we're in, we can only do the show the way we do it. So while Undisputed was obviously a runaway success for so many years that really launched the network, and we're all respectful of that level of success, we're not thinking about that when we come in every day to do our jobs, and we're just trying to do it to the best of our ability.
Yeah, I've never thought 1 second about Skip Bayless. So no, it didn't. Yeah, I didn't think about, and I've worked with Skip. I worked with Skip when I was at ESPN. I worked with Skip here at Fox. But that, listen, man, I'm just trying to keep my head above water and try to connect with these guys as much as possible. And we've forged some very strong bonds and relationships. And it's not just us. It's all the guys that put this show together behind the scenes. They're great. Every morning we put it together. We put it on the grease board. We decide, we discuss, and then we go out and try to put the most entertaining and informative show together that we possibly can. So I haven't honestly had time to think about anybody else's show or, what the facility is doing or what Skip Bayless used to do or what anybody is doing other than what we're trying to put together every day. And I'm proud of what we put together every day.
Yeah, Brandon, I would tell you, and the guys I'm sure will vouch for me on this, when you do a radio show, you and your partner basically show up, you turn on the microphone, you got a producer and maybe another person to answer the phones, and you go. And 4 hours goes by like that. This is a whole different ballgame. There's 15 people in a room at 4 o'clock in the morning. What do you want to talk about? What questions do you want to answer? And it's a lot different for 3 guys that, for so many years was just show up and do it. And now you've got so many different, people involved in the production of the show. But Mark's right. Like, we're blessed. And I can tell you this, and this is unheard of. There's not been a single person that has been fired from when we started this show, 2.5 years ago through the first 3 months of Breakfast Ball. We've kept everybody, and they've all done a really good job.
So as radio hosts, is it strange now having that staff? Like, do you almost feel like it's unnecessary to have that many people there helping you guys with show prep?
Well, look, that's a loaded question.
No, yeah, I mean, no, like I have said this in the room, so I am happy to say it to you, and I've probably talked about it with Craig more than I have with Sting. But I do sometimes. I'm like, I have to keep reminding myself of, like, we got a lot of resources at our disposal. Like, when I do the Parkins pick segment and I go 3-0. And they're like, we should do something fun for you going 3-0. And I'm like, oh, I'll do something like, it hasn't changed me. Like, and maybe I can, like, dress kind of funny. And I'm like, so can we get, like, some, like, fake gold chains and some glasses? And they bought, like, 8 fake gold chains and 3 fake glasses. And they were like, choose which ones you think best complete your vision. And I was like, what? Like, you would think, like, in radio, it's like, I'm buying my own fake glasses. And why are you wearing fake glasses? It's radio. Like, they just... The resources are huge, like, and it makes sense. Like, you need a graphics guy, you need a research person to put what goes on in the graphics, you need a video editor, you need a this. Like, it makes sense, but I still will be like, is that Mike's job or is that Ian's job? Like, I'm still not 100% clear about what everyone around the table does.
Yeah, still learning how to use all the resources.
Yes, I as someone who's so new to TV, I am absolutely still learning how to maximize all of the resources in that room. No question.
Danny, you were on this podcast in April, and I walked away from that conversation thinking that, like, your next step was you were going to try to kind of negotiate in your next radio contract the ability to have a podcast independent of your radio show, the radio station and company. So, like, thinking maybe with Coward and the volume. Never thought that you were on the verge of leaving the Score and Chicago altogether. So how difficult was that decision? Like, obviously it's TV show in New York, great opportunity, but this was your dream job that you gave up.
Yeah, that's pretty on the nose. I did not think that when we talked, certainly, that this was in the cards. Later on, I thought that it was potentially in the cards that I would be in some sort of contributing role at Fox, and how would I be able to balance that with radio? Obviously, Colin had tried to hire me for the volume years ago. That was well reported, and my Odyssey wasn't willing to let me do that in the 11th hour, and that really upset me for a lot of reasons: national exposure, money, all of it. But listen, I had my dream job in my dream city, 10 minutes away from where I grew up, 10 minutes away from my mom, 25 minutes away from my sister. I've been very open about this. My older brother passed away. My father passed away within 6 months of each other. I had not set up the foundation, but become a board of directors at a foundation, was raising money for brain cancer in my brother's name. I would have been happy doing afternoons at the Score for the rest of my career and then just finding other things. And my wife was happy and all of it. And so everything in the world said stay in Chicago, but this job is it's a life changer. Like, just pure, plain and simple. It is just, this can change my 2 young boys' lives forever if it works. And I think it's going to work, which is why I did it. And I think there's more for me to do with radio, and I still have a relationship with the Score, and the Radiothon will continue, which Fox was amazing about. Like, that's in my contract at Fox, that I can still do the Chicago fundraiser every August. So, like, that was really important to me. And, who knows where my career goes, but it wasn't lost on me, man. I'm 38 years old. When I got the offer, I was 37. 37-year-olds who did not play sports do not get offered national television shows. So like the ceiling that is obviously in front of me here is pretty high and much, much, much higher than local radio. So I had to do it. And my wife was incredibly supportive, but she does let me know. She's like, you blew up our life for this. Like this, it better work. So there's a lot of pressure on me. But I honestly like Craig it's a big gamble for him, but he's a radio Hall of Famer and a legend and was #1 in New York for over a decade. Stink's got 3 Super Bowl rings on his fingers. He brings it up every segment. Like this is my big swing. Like, you know what I mean? Like this needs to work for me and my family. And so there was every reason to play it safe and stay in Chicago, but the opportunity was just too good to pass up.
Do you miss radio? Like now that you're away from radio for a few months, do you find more that was radio your passion, or was sports talk your passion and TV is able to fulfill that?
Oh, listen, I knew that radio was my passion and I knew I would miss it, and I do, but we kind of do it like a radio show. Like we give takes and we banter and we ball bust and we have fun, and there will be radio in my future, and who knows where my career goes. And to be honest, like it's exciting to like learn something new.
Yeah.
And like a new challenge and all of that stuff. So I miss working with Speegs and Shane and Tanny and the score. And of course I miss radio, but I have absolutely no regrets. Like I know that it was the right decision. But yeah, of course I miss it, but that's okay. I knew I was going to miss it when I made the decision to leave.
Yeah. Mark, you're still doing radio. What is that schedule and that dynamic like, just doing the TV show in the morning and then jumping right into the middle of your radio show?
The radio show, again, I'm not hosting the radio show. The radio show for me is, what I've always said to my partner, you run the show, let me run around in it. And, that's what I do the best, is just run around in it and create chaos. And so that part is just fun. And the radio station has been great. Obviously our show's been very successful for the last 8 years in Denver, Colorado. So, it's how it is. It's all Broncos talk. It's a Broncos town. We focus a little bit on the Nuggets and a little bit on the Avs, but for the most part, it's all Broncos all the time. And it's a great season and great fun right now with what Bo Nix is doing and what the Denver Broncos are doing. But it really comes down to the radio station and the people that I'm involved with. And my radio host for the last 8 years, Mike Evans, just makes it so easy on me. So I've truly enjoyed being able to keep that aspect of my life intact for a couple hours a day. It's been really good. And, and it's been this new challenge. I mean, I'm older, I've been in this game for 24 years. So all of a sudden to kind of have this reboot of your career where all of a sudden you go from just strictly being an NFL analyst, and I'm still calling games on the weekends, to being, the pseudo host of the show and kind of driving some of the content. It's been a big challenge, and it's been a really cool kind of transition for me. And then, like I said, to work with Danny and to work with Craig and to have their support and to honestly to be told at the beginning of this thing that they were going to go in a different direction, and then having them change their mind and hire me, it's just been an honor and it's been a blessing. And then, to have my schedule work out to where my grandkids ended up, my son ended up getting a job in Florida, coaching University of South Florida. So having my grandkids leave, which is really what's kept me in Denver the last 2 years, and then have that open up and go, all right, well, now I can actually, I'm mobile and now I can do this, and I don't have to feel guilty about walking away from my grandkids because they're out in Florida now. So it just kind of all these moving pieces, all these things that I had prayed about and really thought hard on, all kind of came together at once. And so that was like, well, if that's not an answered prayer, and a sign to move in this direction, then I don't know what is. So I jumped on that opportunity.
Craig, I know you still do your Saturday morning show for WFAM, but how much do you miss that daily, just being on the radio daily?
Look, like Danny said, we're radio guys in our souls. So not doing radio every day of the week is obviously you miss it. I feel like I'm getting into my stride from the TV perspective, it's not just, doing radio. I think it's what radio brings to the table, interacting with passionate fans and the biplane, the back and forth, which, TV doesn't allow for, and the long form, more conversational type of content. But look, I'm having a blast doing this show. The guys have been great. And like I said, we're all blessed. Like, we get paid a decent amount of money to sit on our asses and talk about something we all love and to make fun of each other, make fun of ourselves, and then go home, go to sleep, come back and do it again. So while I love radio, I will always love radio. I'm sure in some way, shape, or form, I'll always be involved in something radio-esque. This is a great, great, great job. And I wouldn't give this up for anything.
Did you have input in building this show? Like, did you have input in Danny and Mark being added to it?
Oh, there's the question. It's funny, Brandon. You're the first guy to ask me that question. Yes, that's right. That's why I get 2% of their salaries. No. So as Mark said, look, I tried to get Mark to be a part of, the Carton Show from day one, because I was looking for a radio guy, a guy that had played, obviously, a guy that, for lack of a better comparison, I don't mean this, in a negative way at all, to be my boomer for all the success that Boomer and I had at the Fan on the radio. And Mark filled that, every step of the way. So the fact that it took 2.5 years to make that happen, all good, because it finally happened. And, they approached me, Fox did, about Danny. And I, listened to some of his radio stuff, saw his appearances on First Things First, watched some of him filling in for Colin. And to me, the best example I had for who I thought Danny was a younger version of Evan Roberts on The Fan. And that's a great compliment, because I think Evan's one of the great radio guys. I am Dan before I was really familiar with his work. And I think Danny would agree to this and Mark would. You meet so many people in your life, and within 30 seconds, is that my kind of guy or not? Is that someone that I just, normal person, we're going to get along, no ego, self-deprecating. And I think the day I met Danny, and I think Mark would say the same thing, I knew when I went to bed that night that we'd be able to work together. And then once you have that part of the equation solved, everything else is easy. So I just felt that from the minute I met him. And I remember I went home and my wife said, well, what'd you think about Danny? And I'm not using any other names here, and don't press me. I'm not going to give you a name. But I go, much better than the last guy.
Well, that is damning with faint praise. Just because I know what you think of some of the last guys.
Yeah. So, part of it to me was, in the first 2 years that I was at Fox, and Fox would tell you this as well, there was a lot of revolving chairs next to me. And there were days I literally did not know who I was working with from one day to the next. And the only way, I think, to have any level of legitimate success is to have consistency. And if there's a different co-host every day of the week, there's no consistency to that. So I was just really, really grateful that A, there was going to be consistency, and that B, because I already knew Mark and I got along and liked each other, I was just happy that Danny was a normal person. And we could just talk like normal guys talk to each other. And it's been great ever since. So I feel blessed about that.
So is it now 3 years in and 3 different versions of the show? Is it more reassuring that FS1 seems to keep investing in the show, or is it concerning that the show keeps changing every year?
I figure I got about 3 weeks left. No. Look, they have made a pledge to me, both contractually and verbally, that they believe in my talent and what I do well. And then there's just a matter of finding other people, Mark and Danny, who could do it their own way, but to complement what I do. Like, I don't do everything well. I don't read a script well. I don't, certain things I just don't do well. I don't like doing. So I'm allowed to do the things I think I do best, and have 2 other guys that I have complete trust in that when I stop talking, they'll know how to take the baton from me, or when they lead a segment, that I can take it from them and take it to another level, then they can take it to another level. So, look, like I said, I'm in year 3 of doing this, year 2 in doing this without doing any radio at all. And I'd like to believe that's because Fox executives, still believe in me the manner they did when they first approached me to have me come work for them. And ultimately, the show's either going to be successful and we're all going to be here a long time. It's going to be great, or it won't be. But we'll have nobody to blame, and that's my whole thing. If you give us a chance to win or lose on merit, well, I'll take that fight any day of the week.
All right, I got a few non-breakfast ball questions for each of you. First, Craig, how was doing the Yankee games over the summer?
Dude, that was awesome. Look, how many people can say that they did New York Yankee games on the radio when one guy's had the job for the last 50 years? So I love doing it. I've done a lot of basketball play-by-play, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But having ability to do baseball, which I'd really never done before, to do it for the most iconic franchise on an iconic radio station and do 3 games, was awesome. And I have a great respect for the men and women that do that for a living, because it's not as easy as people think. And I had a blast doing it. And the best part for me, look, I live in a world, in part because I have loud opinions on the radio for so long, and certainly in part because I got in trouble and my story played out so publicly, where when I go online to social media, a lot of it's negative. There's a lot of people, taking their shots, and, I suffer the slings and arrows, and I do it willingly. It's great. But the fact that so many of their comments were positive, which is such a weird thing for me to read, just it was like a feather in my cap on having done a good job doing it. And if they ask, I'll do it again, which really for me leaves one job left that I have to do before I die. I got to do a New York Knicks game on the radio.
That would be awesome.
And once I get a Knicks game on the radio under my belt, I'm good. Take me when you want to take me.
I think that the Knicks are on 880 now. So does that make make it any more likely that just being that with the whole weird ESPN New York thing going over to Odyssey, the fact that now that signal is there, WFAN and ESPN New York are both heard on Odyssey signals. Yeah. Do you think that brings you any closer to calling a Knicks game? Have you spoken to anybody about it?
Well, I mean, I do have a great relationship with the guy who owns the Knicks, James Dolan. We have lunch every couple months together. I was at the Fan today. Let me give you my Riddler face. No, look, they just hired a new announcer. I'm sure he's going to do great. It's a selfish goal of mine. I did a couple NBA games, did an NHL game, did an MLB game. So to be able to do a game for the team I love more than any of the teams I love would just be awesome. But it's a selfish desire.
Mark, you've been an NFL game analyst for a long time. I know you brought that up earlier in the podcast. A lot has been made about Tom Brady not being able to take part in production meetings. So I'll just ask you, from your standpoint, how important do you find those meetings, and is that a big deal?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, Tom Brady has, a list of the questions, and they record it all. So he puts all his stuff together. I just know from that production crew, because I've done some work with the production crew, the dude is dialed in from a homework standpoint. I mean, he puts in the time, he puts in the effort. And so he sends all the questions that he wants asked of the head coaches, of the different players, of all those things. Okay. And so certainly you can do your job. There's no question about it. Now, me personally, for me, I would hate that. I want to be in the facility. There's a couple of reasons I want to be in the facility. I love to watch practice because when I'm watching practice, I see things in red zone. I see things on the goal line. I see the trick plays. I see the things that they're thinking about come Sunday. So I love to watch that home team run through their practice. And then I love to meet face to face. A lot of the crews Zoom now. They get on a Zoom. They Zoom with the home team. They Zoom with the away team. I go to the home team's facility. I want to be in that facility. I want to face guys. I was critical for several years of Baker Mayfield. I sat down at a table face to face with Baker Mayfield. If you got a problem with me, let's hash it out. Because I'm for you as a player, but if you act like an asswipe, I'm going to call you an asswipe. And so, that's the way I operate. And I always wanted to do games that way. And so I enjoy that interaction. I enjoy that connection that I get with coaches and that I get with the players. And, and so that is an important part of my process, but it doesn't mean that Tom can't do his process the way he does it. And like I said, he is completely buttoned up when it comes to a preparation standpoint. So everybody does it differently. There's a lot of crews that never go into the facility or never, do anything but Zooms, and that's the way they do it. But I just don't do it that way.
Have you spoken to Tom at all about broadcasting?
No, I have not. I mean, I spoke to him on several occasions as a player. I did I did 5. When he first went to Tampa Bay his first year, I think I did 4 or 5 of his games. And so, and he's great, man. He's just a football dude. So he's a lot of fun to talk to when it comes to, discussing the game and understanding and learning the game. But I have not talked to him about broadcasting.
Danny, I'm sure you saw the whole Dan Bernstein Barstool thing a couple months ago. Were you surprised by that? And did you know that Dan Bernstein did not like to be called Bernstein?
I was surprised by it, yes, but I also believe that was a story for the internet. That was a story for the internet. It passed over in a few days. I love Dan Bernstein. He was nothing but nice to me. He's a good friend of mine. He's crazy charitable. He's crazy good at what he does. He overreacted. I think that is obvious. And then I think that there was a huge overreaction to his overreaction.
Yes.
And that's the internet for you. So, I got a chuckle about it from afar. But it also didn't impact me like it did some other people. So it was probably easier for me to be like, this is the dumbest story I've ever seen in my life. Which is how I felt about it. But like everything, it blows over fast and the internet mob moves on to the next thing. So I haven't thought about that story in a long, long time, which is why I kind of chuckled when you brought it up. Because I remember talking about it with Craig. I was like, how dumb is this? Like, this is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. But that's Twitter for you. And then 2 days later, no one was talking about it anymore. So
it was wild how that took off briefly. Have you gotten to listen to the afternoon show much since leaving with Lawrence Holmes there?
Not much, but some. I listened to their interview with Jalen Johnson yesterday and tweeted about it and texted the guys about it. I think the Jalen Johnson interviews, if there's a better weekly player interview in the country, I would love to hear it. I think it's fantastic, and all Bears fans should listen to that weekly. So I haven't heard a ton, but I've heard some. And listen, I'm dear friends with those guys. And, Lawrence is a pro who's been at the Score for forever. And him and Speaks have known each other for forever. And they're both talented broadcasters with some built-in chemistry. They had hosted before together, not on a full-time basis, but for a 10-week stint when Mac was out for one of his issues. And so, they had a pretty high floor to start a radio show. That's pretty rare when you get two guys in there. I don't exactly know how old Lawrence is, late 40s, early 50s, who've been at the station for 2+ decades, who have all of that shared history, who have hosted with each other, best producers in local radio with Shane and Tanny. So the weekly football guests that we already had established, that show had a very, very, very high floor on day one. So those guys are doing great and will do great.
Yeah, I always liked Lawrence a lot, personally. Craig, before we sign off, I also just wanted to congratulate you on being inducted into the New York State Broadcasters Hall of Fame. How was that as an honor?
Very well deserved. No, look, it was.
That's right. That is how he genuinely feels. Whatever he's about to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
No,
Yeah.
It was. I don't think anyone gets into radio with the goal being become a Hall of Famer. And I certainly didn't. It was a great honor. I made the joke at the luncheon that, Boomer got in, I guess, 5 years ago when I was dealing with a lot more serious things in my life. And I was like, man, Boomer and Carton should have gotten in. Reunited Hall of Fame. One of the reasons it meant so much to me is twofold. One, that my family got to be there to enjoy it with me, because I put my family through hell, when I got in trouble. So the fact that my children, my wife, my in-laws, my dad were able to be there, that was a really cool moment for them. And I'm glad they got to enjoy it. And the other one, I want my the halls of the new
We can't hear you, buddy.
Yeah, I think we're losing you.
Oh, there it goes.
We'll we could leave it at that. It was well deserved.
Yeah. It literally cut out when you started to get sentimental.
Yeah.
Which is perfect.
Well, there you go. No, look, it was a great honor to get in, and I signed my autograph now with HOF on it to be as obnoxious as possible. But I didn't see it coming, so when I got the phone call, it was awesome. It was awesome, and it's been 30 plus years, and as I told the story, my first job in radio after graduating Syracuse, I made $12,000 a year and lived in a retirement home in a suburb of Buffalo, New York. So to go from there to where I am now and to have that career acknowledged amongst, my peers it's just awesome. There's no other word for it. It's awesome.
Yeah, great stuff. You guys were great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Before we go, I have a question for you. I've known you a long time. What's your favorite interview that you've done amongst radio shows and radio hosts that when you look back and go, man, I was so happy I got that interview?
Bob Costas.
There you go.
Yeah, for sure, Bob Costas.
Well, let me tell you Bob Costas' story.
Go for it.
So, World Series a month ago, Danny gets the opportunity to go to the World Series, and he's in a suite. And all of a sudden, he looks to his left, and who is sitting next to him but the venerable Bob Costas? So I've known Bob a long time. So I call him up, and Danny's thrilled as I would be if I'd never met him before. Bob is broadcasting royalty. And he's like, I talked to Bob the entire game. And I'm like, oh boy, that's not going to be good. So I go, Bob, Game 4 World Series. Were you sitting next to some guy that was talking sports with you? And he goes, he didn't stop talking the entire night. But the best part was he told me how great my career was, so I let him keep going.
Yeah. Craig condensed that story beautifully. I had met him before, but I was not going to pass up the opportunity to hang out with Bob Costas for the World Series. I don't care if I talked to Zeroff. It was a damn thrill, and I apologize for nothing, Bob.
All right, great stuff. Thank you guys for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks.
That is Craig Carton, Mark Schlereth, and Danny Parkins of Breakfast Ball on FS1. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com. and follow us at Awful Announcing.